Hi, I'm David,
And I'm Maria.
and today we'll be going over Mendelian genetics, reproduction, and cell division. First, we'll start with an overview of the lesson. First question we'll be trying to answer is how do various organisms reproduce? Next question we'll try to answer is what is Mendelian genetics? Then we'll answer what does it mean for a cell to undergo cell division, which is depicted below. And then we'll answer what are the differences between mitosis and meiosis. Starting off with asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction involves only a single parent who can create a genetically identical offspring or clone of itself, and this kind of reproduction can occur in both unicellular and multicellular organisms. This mode of reproduction usually occurs in a short time span with rapid multiplication and growth, and no partner organism is needed at all. However, there's limited genetic variation because mutations are the main method of introducing differences between daughter and parent organisms. There are several different ways that organisms can asexually reproduce. One way unicellular organisms reproduce, such as amoeba, is through binary fission, which involves the parent cell creating a daughter cell through mitosis, which is discussed in detail later. Some organisms, such as Plasmodium, and even amoeba, if the conditions are unfavorable enough, can undergo multiple fission, which is similar to binary fission, except that numerous daughter cells are produced. Unicellular organisms such as Spirogyra can reproduce through fragmentation, which is where the parent cell breaks itself up into several daughter cells. For multicellular organisms such as the Hydra, they can reproduce via a process called budding off, where a new Hydra develops as an offshoot from the parent organism and grows until it is able to separate and exist independently of its parent. Some organisms, such as planaria, can reproduce through regeneration when they are cut into separate parts. As long as this cut segment is large enough to have the necessary means of regenerating, it will grow into a full-size planaria. Many plants, such as potatoes and succulents, can reproduce asexually through the process of vegetative propagation, where you just cut off a part of them and you can replant it and they'll grow into a new plant. Now we'll have some review questions, and feel free to pause the video to answer these. First up is, what are various ways organisms can reproduce asexually? And what are the pros and cons of asexual reproduction? Feel free to pause the video to answer these. Moving on. Now, next we'll talk about sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction requires one haplogamete, which have one of each pair of chromosomes from each parent in order to produce a diploid offspring, which has a complete set of chromosomes. This mode of reproduction allows for greater genetic variation, and the offsprings have a unique combination of their parents' genes. However, it requires two parents and usually takes a longer amount of time compared to asexual reproduction. Animals, which include humans, and a majority of plants utilize this mode of reproduction. There are three stages associated with sexual reproduction. The first stage includes the pre-fertilization events. During this stage, gametes are formed through a process called meiosis, which will be discussed later. Female animals will typically produce larger immobile eggs, while male animals will produce smaller mobile sperm for their gametes. For plants, the process of pollination to produce pollen occurs during this stage. Following this is the stage of fertilization, which occurs when the male and female gametes fuse to produce a zygote, and this can occur externally or internally depending on the organisms. Finally, there's the post-fertilization events as the final stage, which is where the zygote will transform into an embryo through mitosis, which will also be covered later. For plants, this is where the production of their fruits and seeds start to occur. Now we have another review question. What are the three stages of sexual reproduction and what happens during each stage? Feel free to pause the video to answer this question. Moving on. Next, we'll talk about Mendelian genetics. Gregor Mendel laid a foundation for a modern understanding of genetics by crossing various pea plants and examining their offspring from each parent pair. He figured out that there are various types of alleles for each gene, and diploid organisms have a pair of each gene, which can be the same allele, or homozygous, or have different alleles, heterozygous. Before Mendel, many people thought that, for example, a brown bunny mating with a white bunny would produce light brown offspring. However, this is not the case for most alleles. Alleles often exist in a pair of a dominant allele and a recessive allele. And the dominant allele is usually represented with a capital letter, while the recessive allele is represented with the lowercase version of the same letter. A recessive allele will only be expressed when the organism has two recessive alleles, because even a single dominant allele will prevent the recessive allele from being expressed. The expressed alleles of an organism determines its phenotype. However, this does not give perfect information on its genotype, which is the actual alleles that it has in its genome. As seen in the lower left image, a purple flower, which has a purple phenotype, can either have two dominant alleles for purple or one dominant and one recessive allele each. When an organism produces gametes, which are special reproductive cells, only one of its two alleles is randomly contained in each gamete. So a pea plant that is heterozygous for flower color, which means that it has purple flowers phenotypically, can produce gametes that have a 50% chance of having the allele for purple flowers or the allele for white flowers. So if it's crossed with a pea plant with white flowers, then their offspring would have a 50% chance of having purple flowers or white flowers. A Punnett square, which is depicted in the lower left, can be useful for determining these odds. Next, we have a review question. What does it mean for an allele to be recessive or dominant? And how many of each one is needed to determine the phenotype of an organism? Next, we'll be moving on to cell division.
Great, thank you, David. So now we're going to talk about cell division. So what is cell division? It's just a process by which a parent cell divides into two or more daughter cells. And we'll be focusing on binary fission, mitosis, and meiosis. So what is binary fission? It is depicted on the top right corner with the green parent cells. So it is just an asexual reproduction. It's usually done by simple organisms. An organism duplicates its DNA and then divides into two parts by which is called cytokinesis. With each organism receiving just one copy of the DNA. Mitosis, which is depicted in the lower portion of the slide, is when replicated chromosomes are separated into two nuclei. It's an asexual process and it happens in all eukaryotic cells. It gives rise to genetically identical cells in which the total number of chromosomes is maintained. So as you can see on the two daughter cell side, they're exactly the same as the mother cell. And it consists of four stages, which is prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. So now we can go over some review questions. So the first question is, what are the four stages of mitosis and how does binary fission work? Feel free to pause the screen and try to answer these questions without going back to the earlier portions of the video. And then if you really can't answer it, just try to go back. And then we can go over cell division part 2. We'll be talking about meiosis. So meiosis is just another type of cell division. It's a special type of cell division of germ cells in sexual reproduction used to produce gametes, which are sperm or egg cells. So in this process, one cell divides in twice to produce four daughter cells called haploids. They're called haploids because they contain half of the genetic information as the mother cells. So it consists of 8 stages, unlike mitosis. It it just consists of prophase one, metaphase one, anaphase one, telophase one, and then they're just called prophase two, metaphase two, anaphase two, telophase two. And the goal of meiosis is to make daughter cells with exactly half as many chromosomes as the starting cell. That's why they're called haploids. So moving on, we can just go over some review questions. So how many daughter cells does meiosis produce? And just to conclude, there's another visual of the differences between mitosis and meiosis. David, is there anything that you would like to add?
If you'd like us to go into further detail about these topics, then we have this Google form that you can fill out, in which we'll be happy to help out, and we'll have a Q&A session later where we can answer your questions and provide further information. Yeah, thank you for presenting that information, Maria.
No, thank you.
And
Thank you all for watching.
yeah.